Hello everyone, welcome to Rubber Industry NewsHour. It's a weekly program for rubber industry. It's organized by the managed and organized by TechnoBiz on every Monday. I welcome you all for this episode number 21 on the 6th June. Namaskar, Sawadee. Let's dive into today's session. We have give you some what are the highlights of the today's episode. First we have the Mr. Shailendra Agarwal, who is the who passed away last year, and who is tribute to him. Okay. Then we will have the natural rubber market review by Mr. Job Jacob, a rubber industry analyst. Then we have a special guest today, Mr. Vishnu Nambudri. He has passed out his PG diploma program in rubber technology from Indian Rubber Institute. He's a 73 years old, 73 plus. Okay, 73 plus is close to 74 years old, and his story is, it's an inspiring story. At the age of 73, he finished his PG diploma program in rubber technology, and we talk about his inspiration, his story, his rationale behind doing the program. And then we have the special program on the business talk on the rubber industry in the age of climate disruption by Maxim Categorically. Is a managing director of the Romilly solution based in France. So these are the highlights for the today's session, okay, episode. Okay, let's get to the today's episode. The first we will have the short video on the Mr. Shailendra Agarwal. I'd like to introduce about Mr. Shailendra Agarwal. He passed away last year. He is well respected, a good friend to many members of the rubber industry fraternity, both in India as well as across the world. And on his as a tribute and also to remember him, have prepared a short video on the Mr. Shailendra Agarwal. Let's have a look at the Mr. Shailendra Agarwal video. Shailendra Agrawal is really a good man, good rubber industry personal, and is a good well-wisher to many people, including me. I had a chance to associate with him for a couple of years, not only in the rubber industry, but also in the polyurethane industry. He's always there and very energetic, ever smiling. Shailendra, we remember you forever, man. Okay, let's move to the next session. It's a natural rubber market outlook by Mr. Jom Jacob. Let me brief you about Mr. Jom Jacob. Mr. Jom Jacob is well-experienced rubber industry analyst with reference to the natural rubber, in analyzing rubber market, forecasting industry trends, and formulating long-term policies and development plans for natural rubber sector. He has more than 35 years experience. He served the Association of Natural Rubber Producing Countries, NRPC, at Kuala Lumpur as its senior economist for 11 years. Before that, he worked for the Rubber Board of India by holding various positions for 23 years. So let's welcome Mr. Jom Jacob to give a talk on the natural rubber market outlook. Mr. Jom.
Hi everyone. Welcome again to this episode of Natural Rubber Outlook. When we look back to the outlook presented last week, we pointed out that prices would be gaining in the week because of the reopening of China as well as supply constraint. So let us see how the prices performed during last week. We have a slide here, a PPT PowerPoint slide here. So let us see how the futures markets as well as physical market performed during last week. Coming to futures market, Shanghai rubber futures averaged 1.0% higher during last week compared to a week before. When we look into a cycle TSR20, the prices averaged 2.0% higher during last week compared to a week before. In the case of Osaka RSS3, the increase in average price was 3.3% during last week compared to a week before. When coming to the physical markets, STR20 Bangkok prices averaged 1.3% higher during last week compared to a week before. And in Kuala Lumpur markets, SMR20 averaged 3.1% higher during last week compared to a week before. Then coming to RSS, Bangkok market RSS3 prices averaged 1.1% higher during last week compared to a week before. But in sharp contrast to other markets, RSS4 markets at Kottayam markets, India, the prices average 0.3% lower. So this is the only market where prices average lower during last week. There is specific reason for that. In fact, from the end of May, according to weather forecast, the major rubber producing region in India, which is the state of Kerala, which is accounting nearly 70% of the total production of natural rubber in the country, was supposed to receive heavy rainfall, southwest monsoon rainfall from the end of May, according to weather forecast. But there was no rain at all. That means conditions were favorable for tapping and the supply situation was better. In fact, the industry and the market was expecting poor supply, but because of the almost total absence of rainfall during the week, farmers were able to tap and supply was better. So this is why the prices averaged lower in Kottayam markets. Coming to latex markets at Bangkok, prices during last week, average same as the previous week. There was no increase or decrease, but in Kuala Lumpur market prices average 1.1% higher. So this is a summary of the market. Means overall we can see that there is increase in the prices gained during last week, and the two major factors which supported the prices during last week. One, from the demand side, the reopening of China, means especially lifting of most of the restrictions in the Shanghai city. That is one positive factor. Another positive factor which supported the price during last week was the supply uncertainty due to rains in major producing countries, including Thailand and Vietnam. So this is the review of the prices during last week, as well as the underlying factors behind the gains made during last week. Now, let us see, we have one more slide, next slide, in which we will be looking what will happen in the coming week, or how the prices are expected to perform in the coming week. This is more interesting, especially with people in the industry, as well as people in the speculative trading, investment banks. They are more interested to know what is going to happen rather than what happened during the previous week. When we look into the supply side, supply uncertainty will be there. That means uncertainty in the supply of natural rubber will remain in the coming week. That means that, or more specifically, the supply will be disrupted due to rains, especially in the major producing countries, Thailand and Vietnam. So that is one factor. And also in the state of Kerala, according to the latest weather forecast, from today, this evening onwards, intensified rains are forecasted for the next week. That means supply in India also will be down, even though India is not an exporting country, noticeable exporting country. Domestic supply will be lower in India. Then another factor impacting on the supply is a leaf disease. Leaf spot diseases spreading in Indonesia, according to a report. So that is another factor impacting on the supply or contributing to the supply uncertainty. Then another important factor is in fact, actually in the major rubber producing countries, leaf shedding or wintering season is over. So that season is already over. But in the case of Indonesia's regions falling in the south of the equator, the wintering off season is coming only. That will be setting in by the beginning of July. So July-August period will be the leaf shedding season for Indonesia, for a part of Indonesia which is falling in the south of the equator. Nearly 70% of the rubber growing region in Indonesia is in the south of the equator, where the wintering season is coming in. So these are the four factors impacting on the supply or contributing to supply uncertainty. That means the supply uncertainty will continue during the coming week. This is a positive factor for the rubber price. Then coming to the demand sector, demand side. Demand sector is recovering gradually. Reasons are, one, China's manufacturing activities are recovering because COVID restrictions are getting lifted in a phased manner. So that will be having a positive impact on the manufacturing activity. China is accounting for more than 43% of the global demand for natural rubber. So that means if China's manufacturing activity is coming back to normal, the positive impact on the global demand will be substantial. Then another positive news is that ocean freight movement industry is returning to normal. So there is an easing of the prolonged disarray. Over the past 2 or 3 years, the shipping industry or ocean freight movement was in a chaos. Chaos in the sense shipping delay and abnormal increase in the shipping costs. So this situation, that problem is getting eased. In fact, freight costs are also on the decline, and the shipping delay is also, there's an easing of the situation. So overall situation is improving. So that was one factor. The shipping delay and abnormal increase in shipping costs were the two important factors impacting on the global manufacturing activities as well as global trade. So that situation, that problem is easing as of now. So more improvement, positive improvement can be expected in the coming weeks. Then another positive factor, governments across countries are initiating policy action to keep energy prices on hold, because government believe that if the energy prices are allowed to remain high, that will be having major influence on the inflation, and also that will be contributing some kind of discontents among the people, among the citizens. So government across countries are initiating policies to keep energy prices down. That is a positive impact. That will be having another positive impact on the manufacturing activity, because energy price, even though the crude oil prices are going up in the world markets, because of the intervention by the respective governments, this intervention in the form of tax reduction in the tax, or some kind of special fund for the purpose, that will be having a cushioning effects on the energy prices. So these are three important factors positively contributing to the global manufacturing activities, or more specifically on the demand for natural rubber. But at the same time, global economic recovery remains threatened by repercussions of the prolonged war in Ukraine. So that problem is still there. That means if the war problem is still there, but things are gradually improving, although the Ukraine war is still remaining without reaching any ceasefire. So on the one side, we have seen uncertainty in supply, and the other side, we are seeing the demand side recovering. Then apart from supply and demands, there are non-fundamental factors influencing the market sentiment. So we have a number of factors to discuss here. One, speculative investors are likely to be less active during the coming week, because they are awaiting the US Consumer Price Index data to be released on this Friday. If the CPI data, if the Consumer Price Index, that is an indicator of the inflation, if the inflation is high, that will prompt US Federal Reserve to go for aggressive rate hike. That means interest rate will be that's a high CPI will put pressure on the Federal Reserve to go for higher interest rate aggressively, or go for aggressive policy action. So this because that means at the moment, speculative investors are awaiting the CPI figure to be released on Friday. Until that, they are likely to be less active, because they can't take major investment decision because of the uncertainty on the CPI figure. That means risk appetite is likely to be low during the week. Risk appetite means the willingness to take risk, that will be low during this week, or that particular factor will discourage speculative investors from investing in risky asset classes, including rubber futures. That's a negative factor on the futures market. Then there are a few more negative factors impacting on the futures market. One, strong dollar. Strong dollar means when the dollar is strong, speculative investment is risky. It means more expensive, and also high interest rates. So this, and also there is uncertainty factor. This will be contributing to the low risk appetite. Then at the same time, a relatively favorable conditions in the physical market. Earlier we have seen supply there's some supply uncertainty. Also we have seen demand sector recovering gradually. That means physical market conditions are relatively favorable. If the physical market conditions are relatively favorable, that will be contributing to the futures market as well as. That means whatever happening in the physical market will get reflected in the futures market. So in that sense, we are expecting some kind of a investment or buyer interest in the case of rubber futures, because of the favorable conditions remaining in the expected in the physical market. Then another favorable factor in the case of Osaka rubber futures is the yen's continued weakness against the dollar. When the yen, the Japanese currency is weak against the dollar, that means rubber futures traded on the Osaka exchange are more attractive, economically more attractive. So that is a positive factor. Then again, there are positive factors like crude oil prices are expected to go further up, and that will trigger speculation on possible substitution from synthetic rubber to natural rubber. Even though the actual substitution is less, whenever oil price take a normal high, that will make synthetic rubber more expensive. So speculative investors believe that synthetic rubber getting expensive will lead to substitution from synthetic rubber to natural rubber. So we have a set of factors negatively impacting on the rubber futures, or set of factors keeping investors away from rubber futures. At the same time, we have another set of factors which can attract speculative investors to rubber futures. So in total, putting all together, so we have the final slide here, putting all the points together. So coming to the last slide, that will be giving the picture of the market during coming week. So what will be the price trend during the coming week? What can be expected? As earlier mentioned, we have physical market conditions are expected to remain favorable. Favorable means we have supply uncertainty as well as demand sector improving. That means the physical markets are expected to make noticeable gains during this week, supported by supply uncertainties and improving conditions in the demand sector. So this is the one important observation about the expected performance of the rubber price during the coming week in the physical market. Then gains in the physical market can partly support rubber futures. So it means the rubber futures can gain from the favorable conditions prevailing in the physical markets, but in the futures market, low risk appetite can dissuade investors from speculative investors and thereby hold back the futures from making major gains. So we have physical market condition favorable, but there are a set of factors which can discourage rubber futures from making major gains. So the next week, this week, what we can expect is a favorable condition in the physical market, but a set of factors which can prevent rubber futures from making major gains. This is what we are expecting during the coming week. That's the end of the rubber market outlook for this week. We will see again next week at the same time. Thank you very much.
That is the market review, market outlook. So just to inform you that Mr. Jom Jacob is also giving a masterclass on the natural rubber economics on 15th June. And we have a program together with Mr. Jom Jacob, NR Dialogue, and we are the episode number 6. On the 27th June, we're focusing on the natural rubber industry in Thailand. Our invited guest is Mr. Supadej Wongsakul. He is a Deputy Secretary General of Thai Rubber Association and also Executive Secretary of International Rubber Association. We'll be having a discussion with him as a dialogue on natural rubber industry in Thailand. So I welcome you all to participate in this special program. This is a special program today, a success story of Indian Rubber Institute, PGDIRI program. And we have a special guest, Mr. Vishnu Nambudri. I don't want to call him old man, but he's 73 years old, but no choice, call him old man. But he finished his PG diploma program last year, which is really amazing, and it's an inspiring story for many of us to learn about him. So Mr. Vishnu Nambudri, welcome to the special program. It's a pleasure to have you. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Is it okay?
Yes, please. Welcome.
Thank you.
Vishnu sir, I call you sir because you are my grandfather old, so let's call you the sir.
I take it as a privilege. I take it as a privilege. Okay.
It's really wonderful and amazing. At the age of 73, you have that energy, passion to study, and you actually are inspiration to not only just old people your age, but actually the young people to learn more. So welcome to this special program. I'm happy to have you on this success story of IRI's PG DIRA program. So Vishnuji, tell us your background so that people understand you. What is your background?
Sir, I have taken my science graduation from Kerala University. From there, I shifted to Delhi in search of job, and ultimately I landed in Goodyear Tires as a management trainee in 1974. When I was studying in Goodyear, I was actually attending certain classes conducted by Dr. D. Banerjee Learning Center in Delhi. So I got actually inspired to write the exam and all that. But due to certain reasons, I could not write the exam because of the death of my father and all that. Subsequently, I had to shift to Apollo Tires. I joined Apollo Tires, and when I was in Apollo Tires, I tried LPRI, and I failed in that. Okay. Yeah. So every time, I used to think that I should get through, and I should qualify myself to be called as a rubber technologist. That was my ambition from that time onwards. But anyhow, the time came, when I started my own business. In 2003, I left JK and started my own business near Delhi. The name of the place is Gurgaon. Gurgaon is very near to Delhi, some 23 kilometers from Delhi in Haryana state. And I'm making, automobile parts, then certain parts for railways and white goods. Recently, I started making some items for Indian defense. So I am very much interested to do, R&D. In fact, I spend a lot of money for research in my own factory, my own way, and I do a lot of things in that. So always I used to think that, what is about, the synthetic rubber. Natural rubber, of course, I am coming from a place where natural rubber is there, and I am very much, even we have a small, plantation and all that. So apart from that, I thought that, the synthetic rubber was actually a wonderful thing for me. Various types of synthetic rubber, according to the, you can tailor make, all these types of rubbers. Even, certain parts of human body can be made with. So I got fascinated with, this synthetic rubber, and I wanted to know more about, synthetic rubber. I started, purchasing, certain books written by Morris Morton, Nondon, and many of the books, I am having today. So I thought that, last year from IRI, I got a call saying that, would you like to send some of my employees for this course? I said, I myself will join. I'm also interested because, IRI has started classes and teaching people. It's a great thing happened in India, which was not there earlier. And I'm thankful to everybody, all faculty members, especially Dr. Mukhopadhyay and Sam Bandyopadhyay and Syed Musa. All these people, they were all known to me. In fact, because having spent more than 36 years in tire industries, all these tire people know me very well. And moreover, I was participating in many of the activities of rubber board. And rubber board people, they have conducted certain seminars and all that for exporting rubber from India and all that. And I was a part of it. because I got a chance to attend a, open up a, I think in China, Made in India show was there, and I participated in that, and I had a stall over there. And from there, this rubber board people said, why don't you become a promoter of, rubber export from India to other countries and all that. So always, I was very much interested in the technological factors as well as the rubber products and all that. Even I was thinking that, why don't we make, create lot of energy from rubber, because, it is considering the atomic structure and all that. I was thinking, still I am thinking about it, and I am reading. Even yesterday, I have been reading about, gelation of rubber. Very, very interesting subject, in fact. So this has happened with me, and ultimately, I got through. That's what I say.
Super. First of all, congratulations. You what you call dream come true, or unfinished job is finished, right?
Yes.
So that's a big achievement. I think I'm very pleased to know that at the age of 73 you have completed. I always wonder. You work in the tire industry. You have exposed to all the knowledge. I think all about A to Z about rubber, and you started your own company almost from 2003. You 2003. You have started your company. Yeah. So I think almost like 20 years now. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you're producing the non-tire products. We're talking
Yes.
about railways, construction, some automotive parts.
Yes.
Man, you already have plenty of knowledge in the brain. And why you studied PGDIRI? What?
I told you, no, I wanted to
Finish
know
it.
more about the science of rubber.
I see.
That was
Yeah.
the main, even in my graduation, I had taken chemistry as my subject, and I was very much interested in organic chemistry and all that. And my suggestion, anybody who is going through this course, they must have the facility to see certain industries and work in laboratory at least for 1 week, one month at least, so that they will be well versed with what is going on and how you can test the rubber and all that. Many of the people don't know, even after taking a diploma or degree or whatever it is. I know many of the BTech people who have taken degrees from universities in India. Many of the people, we have got a lot of employees like that. Their knowledge level is not good enough because they don't have practical experience. So IRI, my suggestion is IRI should, take initiative, at least, to have, a certain type of, going to other industries and all that. And they get to know about, manufacturing of other items like conveyor belt, V-belt, and there are n number of rubber products, about which, people should have the knowledge. And when
So
you get the knowledge, you will be more interested to know about it.
you're suggesting that you give some practical, like a site tour to get an exposure to the industry of various products, so they have a better understanding. Yeah, it's well taken. I think are you going to allow anybody to visit your company if somebody IRI people? Yeah, well, that's nice.
I'm sponsoring my own people, and I have declared that I will be paying the fees and all that, everything. My company is paying for them, and I'm giving them leave, study leave and all that if they are interested. My my company is having only 80 employees, and out of that about 20 management staff, and around 12 engineers are there. And I told everybody, everybody has to go through this examination and learn more about it. I don't mind even if you get out of my company for betterment. I don't mind, but at least getting knowledge about any particular subject where you are working, you get a chance to work on that, to work on day-to-day problems you can solve, you can use your brain, because rubber industry, in fact, from the very beginning, I know that so many defects are coming. The defect control, that is quality control, is a very, very, very important factor, and people are not giving much stress in that in any of the industry, because I had the chance of visiting a lot of companies, other tire industries abroad, and also so I was lucky on that. But at the same time, there are many people who are taking this course, and they do not know much about this vast subject. The more you learn about, the rubber technology, you see that it is an ocean.
How many people from your company is going to register for the PGDRI either this year or next year? Are there any students?
This year I selected 4 people.
Very good.
And 3 of them, they were not interested. Only one man has joined again. And last year, one boy has joined and he got the 4th rank in India, all over India.
Oh, very nice. That's good. Oh, very nice. Yeah. So you already started inspiring in your own team.
Definitely.
I think, that is very nice.
In Kerala, my brother's daughter, my niece, and their CEO both have joined in this course. I am promoting,
Okay.
Yeah. My brother
So,
also is in Kerala. He is having the same business. He is making a lot of items, related with rubber industry. Plus, he is importing a lot of, rubber chemicals and all that. He is very active in Kerala.
okay. So,
Yeah.
what kind of things you learn, okay, and it help your current business? Something new you learn out of this program that you think, yeah, I learned something new and you benefited in my business.
Yeah, I'm trying to introduce certain things which I have learned, especially today nowadays. I am developing microcellular tubes. Whoever is listening, in fact, in India nobody is making the quality product, and still it is coming from China. People are buying it from China and supplying it in India, in Indian companies, especially in automobile industry. So that is another thing, and I'm making new items like printing rollers. I started recently making. Then I started making many items related to tire industries. Then I started making flooring, rubber flooring, having very high voltage resistance. So I'm doing a lot of new things, and I get a chance to learn more about it and think about it. How I can improve it, how I can improve the quality, and how to reduce the quality cost. All these things. Many of the places in industry, many of the people are joining in PGDRI field just to enhance their personal acumen, not to apply it in the industry. For that, the industry people, the owner of the company should encourage the people. I give my people to do any type of R&D. I don't mind to spend money for that, and my people know about it. And I have already declared that
we need more of Vishnus, Vishnu Nambudris. We need more. Okay, so that to get more people encouraged to study at the same time, whatever the learnings they gain out of the program, utilize it in their work, whether to improve the process or whether it is to develop a new product or R&D. I think what you are doing is amazing. I want to show you some picture. I think you already know. This is guys. Look at this picture. This man was studying. He was saying his son has posted about him in the LinkedIn a couple of months ago. It became a big viral. Probably in the rubber industry, only Mr. Vishnu got so much likes. 40,000 likes for Mr. Vishnu's picture and 240 shares. More than 1,300 comments for his, his son talked about, about this, why he's studying PGDRI. He also get educated about, computers. Now he is a smart guy, how to use the computer. So it's nice. I want a special thanks to your son to post this picture in the LinkedIn. I mean, it's very inspiring, whether they are rubber people or non-rubber people. Okay, and so how do you feel about it when you see this kind of like this? When your son posted on it, what was your feeling at the time when you get response like
that? My responsibility increased. That time, I thought that no, I have to definitely, pass this exam.
You need to show the certificate, right? Yeah, I had to finish it. Otherwise, yeah, it's like one photo shoot.
I really wanted to join, attend the classes, lecture classes, and learn more. to learn more about, many of the people, they have got, vast knowledge about the subject. They are thorough with the subject. So I don't want to name, specific people about it. And people like, people from Gorakhpur, IIT Gorakhpur, and highly learned people are coming for this lecture. And I think, they are really devoted for that. Their devotion is really uploaded. I mean, I have to appreciate.
Yeah, yeah. Very nice. It's really, you is not only inspiring the people who are hesitant to learn more, particularly the old people. Sometimes people retired, I don't want to learn anymore, or I already know everything, but you are like a inspiration for the experienced people also. You can always learn something new from any program that you join, and improve your knowledge at the same time, use it in your work. So can you comment about your teachers? I think there are many teachers for the program, right? What was your opinion about the content of the program?
I have already told you, they are totally devoted in that. They have studied, and there is a question answer session, and everybody is capable to give, answer to our questions. That's a great. Unless you have, thorough knowledge about the subject, you will not be able to answer just like that. It's very difficult. And everybody, is capable to give the answer. That means, they are totally prepared, and their knowledge level shows that, they about the subject matter. Yeah, so that is commendable. And for your information, and I am again, I get the privilege of attending the same course again. Every Sunday I am utilizing to, repeat hearing all these things again.
To refresh the same lectures again and again. Yeah, maybe you should contribute for them to your as a teacher as well. Somehow I think that you have good experience on R&D in real story. Yeah, so yeah.
I have this thing, anybody who is working in the industry, they have to go deep into it. If you can ask any nook and corner of a tire industry, right from mixing to the curing to the dispatch area, I can just to imagine it. Each and every, operations I know, because I have, minutely, looked into it, observed it. So observation is the main thing, when people are working in any industry. They have to observe, not only, they have to look around and see what is happening around, and they should see deep into it. That is my, only thing at this age, I have to tell the young people. And I'm telling to my boys also, my employees also, I'm telling the same thing.
Very nice, very nice. Any final message that who thinking not to study more? Okay, what is your message to them?
Sir, studying, if you just start learning, and if you start understanding, then naturally, the interest comes. You get inspired. You go further and further. Just, if you read any book, and if you start understanding it, you get interested in that. It is just like, detective novel. In fact, you cannot convert a detective novel into a science book. That is totally a different thing. But at the same time, if you start really understanding the subject matter, naturally you will get into it. You will go on reading it. You may even read up to 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the night. You may not, you will not get sleep if you get interested in a particular subject. And so, people should try, that aspect. And learning is the only to improve our country or the world as such. There are a lot of things to be done further in any field. That's my feeling, and that is my message to everybody. And thanks to all faculty members through this channel, I wanted to, and to you also, my sincere thanks for giving this opportunity to talk to you. Okay, wish you all the best. Yeah,
thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's nice to have. Actually, I never had a person to talk about 73 years old talking about. I heard the stories in the newspapers, but not in real. So, and I had a chance, and particularly in the rubber industry, you are a real inspiration. I see the energy in you, and you can pass on this energy to your, I'm sure, a great success for your company. and also you can motivate many young people to learn. And you put one nice word for the development of country. I think the learning should be, if you learn more, if you do well, and you be the part of the development of the country. I think that is ultimate goal for any person, whether you are Indian or non-Indian, any country, but you learn for the development of your own country. Super. Good
And
message.
as a God as such, you can contribute to the world, as such.
Great. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, and I wish you have a good health and continuous progress with your education. I'm expecting you have more degrees. Not just in PGDRM, probably on the internet or IoT, or your son Ajay. Thanks to Ajay for sharing this picture. On the LinkedIn, you are the rubber industry superstar in the LinkedIn as well. So fantastic. Keep it going, sir. Keep it going and stay in good health. Thank you very much. Thank you. Guys, that's a story about the that's a story about Mr. Vishnu Nambudri, and you can see his energy level and the way he's explaining to us about how it benefited, what he's doing in his company, why it is so important for him to finish his this program. And thanks to all the IRI people for their great work and helping the Indian rubber industry. Please stand by. Okay, let me show you, introduce to you the rubber industry upcoming events. Before we go to the next session, the upcoming event in Malaysia, it is the Malaysian Rubber Expo. It is called IRICE, International Rubber Industry and Conventional Expo, which is going to happen on the 6th to 8th September. I welcome you all to visit and participate in this expo. We have an exhibition conference called IRC 2022 in Bangalore, India, during 24th to 26th November. The International Rubber Conference and Exhibition organized by Indian Rubber Institute. Welcome you all to participate in this IRC 2022. These are our TechnoBiz exhibitions. We have a GRTE, which is 5th edition, will be next year, 29th to 31st March. And then we have Arab Rubber Expo, which is going to be in November, not in October, in Sharjah in UAE. So these are two exhibitions we organize next year. I welcome you all to participate in this one. Okay, now we are here on the business talk today. Business talk is focusing on the rubber industry in the age of climate disruption by Maxim Casually. He is a managing director of the Rongyi Solutions based in France. Let me brief you about Maxim. We heard about digital disruption. I think this is very timely, very important to know about the climate disruption, how it is affecting the rubber industry. Maxim is a French engineer with majors in polymers and operational research. He joined ExxonMobil Chemical in 1997 and gained his field experience in Asia, US, and across Europe, mostly in rubber divisions. He was notably logistics and operations manager for the butyl EPDM rubber site in Normandy between 2004 and 2008. He then managed a global TPV elastomers activity of ExxonMobil from Houston between 2014 and 2017, including the major expansion of capacity. Until 2019, he was responsible for managing the strategic and operational marketing team for all automotive elastomers with a global team responsible from product and application development to OEMs interaction. Finally, from Singapore, he then developed the commercial strategy for rubber plasticizer for the base oils division. Maxim is an associate with the GXS Partners since 2020, the Hong Kong advisory firm specializing in the strategic development of specialty chemicals, rubber and plastics, and associate sectors. He helps organizations of all sizes grow in China and across Asia. He was a key member of the GXS Partners team that notably advised Celanese on their recent $1.1 billion acquisition of Centoprene TPV in 2021. He co-founded Wrong-E Solutions in 2021. He puts his knowledge of petrochemicals and global chain at the service of organizations wishing to better manage climate risks and which seek to articulate an effective low carbon path for the planet that is also financially sustainable. Clients are ranging from ambitious innovators to established global leaders in the chemical and polymers value chain. Maxim, welcome to this business talk on the rubber industry in the age of climate disruption.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Well, yes. Can you open your webcam too?
Yeah. All right.
Let me ask you to share the screen. Go.
Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, good to go. Yeah.
All right. So thanks, Baron, for the introduction. I have deep roots in rubber, and rubber is one of the applications, one of the commodities, and one of the businesses that are affected by climate in lots of different ways. And we basically we developed a case study last year that we actually reused some of the concepts with lots of clients already. That was basically stress testing the rubber industry against what's happening with climate. So diving in, what I wanted to share today, I will go briefly through the fact that climate is changing and try to define what are climate risks. What is really impacting our businesses and our lives and the way we are running all around the world. I will try to build this link with GHG emissions. Climate and GHG emissions are really two sides of the same coins. The IPCC reminded us that many times, and every time that you start to try to understand what's going on with climate, either the consequence or as a response to it, the GHG come very bright and center. So I will cover a little bit of that. Then the question is, like, once we realize that we have a problem, I think it always boils down to what can we do about it? And what is climate resilience? How can we actually build resilience against this climate that is impacting us? I will go through details of the case study. It's mostly a risk analysis, so that basically taking the rubber industry as a whole as a kind of generic approach. Some of the data come from clients that are kind of anonymized, if you will, and then go into what looks like a GHG assessment of a rubber plant or a rubber transformation plant. I think that we've used the graph on the left for a long time now. That was talking about, you mentioned COVID-19 disruption, Peram, and I think that was unfortunately a very good training for what's coming next, which we see now. Risks of recession, inflation coming in that we haven't seen in the last 40 years to that extent, which will probably drive some of the end of the quantitative easing that has stopped so much the growth in the world. So businesses will have to adapt to that. But honestly, that's unfortunately a very small considerations when we bring it back to whatever climate change will bring to us. So a few words on us. Wrong-E Solution it's a mission venture. So it means that when we wrote the charter of the company, there is an article where we basically commit to build a world that is adapted to climate, so where we try to build resilience to climate change and carbon neutral by 2050. So our objective with all of our clients, and we try to get as many clients as we can from that perspective to go and do the right thing about adapting the society to whatever is coming, and also contributing to a better climate by 2050. becoming carbon neutral. My co-founder was also in the chemical industry. We were both at very international jobs in lots of different areas, so are very sensitive to culture. She's more focused, I would say, on upstream. She knows very well what becomes of oil and gas once it gets out of the well to the point where it's becoming a polymer, and then probably more on the downstream side. So we have already built the team. The team is located here in the French Alps. That's this little picture that you see. But we have really a global reach, and one of the plants that we are currently assessing is actually the one underneath. You see, it's on these big chemical sites. What we are trying to do with all of our clients is try to understand what can happen to them in terms of climate. Think about circularity and what we can do to basically reduce the exposure as well as reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore transform their business towards a low carbon solution. Importantly, we are tackling, even in chemicals, we realize that plants to plants, clients to clients, all the needs and the handles will be different. So we are building a network that helps us reach out and lets us bring the solution to our clients as they see fit. Every assessment leads to a different priority. It can be steam generation, it can be temperature of the river, it can be sourcing of biomass. So we have basically all these partners around us to help us do that. Specifically for Asia, we've drafted an agreement with JXS partners to go and basically bring the solutions that we've developed and the methodologies that we've built towards as many clients as we can in Asia Pacific. So being based in Hong Kong also helps understand a lot of the intricacies of the Asia Pacific market. So that's why I wanted to talk about this one. So climate is changing. I know that it took us a little while, and it took me personally a long while to actually see the idea percolate that what we are seeing is a trend. Globally, there are many indicators that make this climate change perceivable. We start to understand that it's happening. And interestingly, I really like these anecdotes. I live in a country where we are tracking wine quality and when will wine be produced, and in other parts of the world, everyone has its way of trying to understand what is the weather at any point in time in history. And this is the recording of when was cherry blossom in Kyoto, and it's been recorded for really thousands of years. Quite interestingly, it's an effect. It's already a consequence of the weather that day. And what you see, and I've run too many rubber plants not to know that this is a process that is not under control. You can see that there is normal fluctuation between the 100 and 110 days of the year when the cherry blossom is at its full. There is a wide range of variation. So if you just have a look at a couple of years, it's just impossible to understand what's happening. But when you start to plot this trend, you start to see that as the Industrial Revolution kicked in the 19th century, it's coming earlier and earlier and earlier. And you see this 20 years rolling average, which is making a rolling average is typically the way we are. It's the level 0 of quality control and process control. Just that shows us how the climate started to drift. So from weather to climate, and we are seeing the effects already, because here we are measuring an effect. It's clear that there's a long-term trend that shows this structural deviation. So what is happening? So there are millions of scientists that work together, and a lot of them assembled in the IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change, to try to understand what's happening. And they've started to track what's happening, really. The reference 0 is the average between 1850 and 1950 of temperature. It started to increase. It's already higher in 2022 than it was in the past. That's what you see on the left-hand side. This temperature starts to drift. By 2022, we have already reached plus 1.1. And there's a high chance that we'll actually be around plus 1.5 before the end of the decade. And these temperature variations are not only we have to put we put the sweater less in the year, or there will be a bit less snow in some summits. what is very, very important when you are starting to analyze the consequences and the probabilities that weather events can have on your business, you start to have a look on decennial and centennial events. So I've been in plants design and I've run plants before. You try to understand what will be the average temperature of the river that you are using to cool your process, for instance, for a long period. And you know that there are periods of heat waves. And you can find statistics about this. So you say you design typically your system to resist, to withstand the decennial type of events, so the events that will happen every 10 years, every 50 years. And the centennial sometimes, the cost of adaptation, so the cost of investment to be able to withstand a very extreme situation is maybe not worth the trip. We'll just take the risk of shutting the plant down if it's really, really too warm that summer. Now, the problem is that with this shift into the average surface temperature scenarios that you see from the IPCC on the left-hand side, when you translate this to the probability that events actually occur, the frequency is increasing dramatically. Events that used to happen every 10 years, so you can talk about early monsoon, or you can talk about annual precipitation way over the average or way below the average, heat waves, catastrophic winds, all these sort of events, when they were happening once every 10 years, well, in 2022 already, at +1 degree, where we are between +1 and +1.1, the calculations show that they will happen 2.8 times more. So it's coming back every 3 years already. And with the scenarios that IPCC has developed at +1.5, +2, or the extreme, which is +4, and we can discuss whether this is an extreme, it's eventually becoming an annual event. So the drought or the floodings or the long periods of heat waves are really, really recurring much more frequently in a warmer climate than they do before. You can see the trend for 50 years, it's about the same. The centennial kind of events, here they track 50 years because it's easier given the databases that they have, are happening 39 times more. So it's pretty much every year. So the catastrophic events that only happen once every 50 years or once every 100 years, that typically no engineer has seen because you don't really stay in the same plant or location for more than 50 years, even though we had a great example before that you can have very, very long careers in the businesses. Events that you will have in the past never seen will actually happen close to every year. And the intensity of these events will also increase. I mean, we know that a warmer sea will lead to more catastrophic events. I lived in Houston, Texas for many years. I had the privilege to see Harvey landfall. Harveys will come more often, as we see, and they will also be more dramatic because there will be more energy put into these catastrophic events. So today we know that, like, the periods of heat waves, not only they happen every year, but they happen with a much higher degree of intensity. So the events are more frequent and more extreme, and it will only get worse. We are only reached somewhere around 2022. By 2050, regardless of what we do, regardless of how good we are with decarbonization, regardless of all the good things that we are trying to do to reverse the trend, it's quite likely we'll be around +2 degrees. So +2 degrees, you're already here. These catastrophic events that you used to design your plants for, they will happen every year, or every second year, because it's ×6 or about for +2 degrees. So this has really an impact on the business, because businesses think about this, and lots of businesses, have designed their plants so that they can withstand this kind of events. And so what are the other kinds of events that we can think about? And that's why I want to make this link with GHGs. Climate scenarios and GHG trajectories are linked. IPCC is not a prescriptive body. They don't say you should do that and therefore you will end up there. What they are doing is say, given how things are, these are the different climate scenarios that we can think about that all depend and that are all interlinked with GHG emission scenarios. And here I show the thermometer, which is either red or blue, hot or cool. if it's really hot, like plus 4.4, it means that we will peak GHGs at 3 times current emissions. We've emitted 36 billion tons last year. The numbers were known last week. We will probably reach close to 140 degrees, 140, billion tons per year, with a consequence of plus 4.4. So we have to understand that all these these temperature scenarios are actually linked to GHG scenarios. So if it's super hot, we'll have lots of physical risks, because as we've seen at plus 4.4, these hurricanes come every 2 years. The heat waves, like India has known, will come pretty much every year. And the direct exposure has really physical implications. So we will have lots of physical risk if we're in a world that has done nothing and continues to do all these emissions and continues to use GHG and emit GHG. That's what we'll see. We'll have lots of physical risks. So we will have to be very ready for physical risks. If we are super successful, it means that life will have changed pretty dramatically. We will manage to contain the GHG emissions and we will be at a lower temperature. But then we will face lots of transition risks, because it really means that the consumption will change. We will have to have only EV cars rather quickly. We will accelerate lots of transfers of technologies. Societal choices will be made by consumers. When you take the lower temperature scenarios in the IPCC, it really means that the society is changing. And it means that companies will also be on the forefront here of changing things. There are reputational risks, and we start to see some of these trials and going to court already, where companies are basically put in front of the community and say, you've known all this for a long time and you've done nothing. If we're in the world where the society really tries to transition fast to a low GHG consumption, this will happen even more. Energy prices will be very complicated. You will have energy of a different nature, because if we are transitioning that fast, it means that there will be lots of renewables, and renewables are not pilotable like a good old coal power plant or gas power plant. So regardless of what happens, risks will be present. And there is a risk to me, having worked in the oil and gas industry for so many years, which is really central to this, is the fact that we are depleting resources. I remember the CEO of Exxon saying, we are a depletion business. What he means by that is, like, when you start a well, after 6-7 years, the production is too low and you're just letting it go. We are depleting the total stock of oil and gas that we have, and it will not come back anytime soon. All of these dead leaves and dead dinosaurs that are in these different layers that we consume oil and gas from, they are disappearing. In the period between 1984 and 2019, so roughly 35 years, the world has produced, it means that we have burned 329 billion of barrels. That's numbers from the EIA, which is an independent energy agency, international energy agency. And we've only added, the world has only added 74 billion barrels of proven reserves. And proven reserves are proven to the point where people start to actually have a look at them. You can go and dig into the data from all oil and gas companies in 2020 who took the opportunity of a market that was really, really hit by COVID destruction to actually book lots of losses in their books for reserves going down. So we are living above our means in terms of in terms of fossil fuels. We are consuming more than there is in the ground. So something will happen, because oil is behind a lot of the applications that has actually made modern life possible. So that's a risk in itself, and companies have to think about that. And if you want to, there is a risk. We talk a lot about resilience. I think everybody heard the word resilience now in different acceptions since COVID. Climate risks, physical risks, transition risks, and at the end of fossil fuels are all risks that we need to develop resilience for. So the first ones to actually talk about that were the financial community. They are very good at managing risks. Insurance companies, investors, the BlackRocks of this world, the EAG of this world, the people who are doing reinsurance, for instance, who are insuring multiple portfolios, they are very good at managing risks. and they saw that there was something fishy around climate. That some of the assets that they might buy might actually be worth nothing if they are close to a sea, and that might be under the sea level when sea levels continue to rise, or just they are in a market that will eventually disappear once the world has converted to a low carbon path. And so the TCFD was launched. 32 members from the G20. It depends from the Financial Stability Board that was established back in 2008. And they've been doing lots of recommendations, and they basically give a white book, a thought piece, a whole process for anyone who wants to approach climate risk. And it's really good for finance. You know, have a look at your financial portfolio of investments, have metrics and targets, analyzes all this. Have your risk management in place, understand that your strategy needs to cover all these aspects, and eventually turn to governance, where you actually need to make sure that you are covering all bases. But it's really focused on financial. It's very good for investors. It's actually being used today because we have clients, for instance, who had to renegotiate their debts, and one of the due diligence part of debt renegotiation today goes through what is your climate risk? What are you exposed to? So that's quite interesting. It's becoming super pervasive into the financial industry. In the industry making, like we are in the rubber industry today, probably not so much. And you need an approach that actually covers climate risks and GHG at the same time, because as we said, it's two sides of the same coin. So that's where I will just show you in this case study a little bit of the climate resilience process, or give you an idea about how you could do that if you want to do that for your own organizations. We need to do two things. I talked about adaptation, and there are two words that you hear very often: is adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation means that the climate is changing and it's hotter, and can you run your plant in a hotter environment? And there are many things, and I will give you lots of examples that you need to consider. Whether you're buying biomass or whether you're buying actually synthetic rubber, you have issues regardless of what you are supplying your rubber from. And you really want to reduce your impact on climate too, because that's your way to contribute to the fact that, you know, the weather, the climate might be better in the end. And there's a whole set, and we've developed internally a whole set of methodologies and a process. But you know, for people who like me, I'm not 73. I'm only 49, but I've been in industry enough to know that we've done this many times, right? We did it for safety, we did it for quality. We had all of these ISO certifications that took place in the 90s and the early 2000s. It always starts with the same kind of processes. Here, what we say is that we probably have to do the same thing with climate. You have to measure your risks and understand your GHG, align basically what you want to do with your business strategy too. You know, if you have a plant that is high risk because it's very close to a port that will actually be impacted by low river levels, like you have on the Rhine River, which will happen more often, but you plan this plant will be shut down in 2 years, you probably don't need to be concerned too much and spend too much time on this. Once you've aligned really with your strategies and everything that you are doing with regard to your business, you really want to develop your priorities, your KPIs, your reduction plans, your targets and objectives in order to reduce the risk and to reduce GHG emissions. We think it's leading companies that we've been through and been working near, on their side to this culture of carbon scarcity. Everybody then starts to understand that, you know, there is carbon behind everything we do, and we have to treat it as a precious commodity and try to reduce its consumption. And we will see what this looks like when we apply it to the rubber industry. So we see on this slide, these are the practicalities, you know, because I'm an engineer. You need to give me a method, you need to give me a plan, and that's pretty much the plan. Need to understand how the organization, map the organization. What does it look like, your value chain, and where do you get your supply from? Where are your plants? So that you can do two things. At the top, you will do the GHG emissions evaluation, reduction plans for these emissions, and then define what we call get to the state of low carbon solutions, where actually you have reduced the carbon footprint of making the products that you are making or delivering the service that you are delivering. at the same time, in parallel, because all of that is really closely linked to the mapping and also to the emissions, you will evaluate the transition risks, the physical risks too, that you or your suppliers are exposed to, or your customers, because any of these parts of the value chain can actually cause trouble for a plant. I remember, running the rubber plant, and we had to go lower because the consumer is actually full, because they had a problem with their storage. So all of that can impact you, and it will impact you dramatically more with in the context of climate change. And you want to develop then your resilience strategies, assess it, understand your opportunities, develop these plans, and see what your profile look like before and after you've done some activities, and iterate and go and repeat. So the climate resilience workstream addressed really these two sides, the GHG and the risks, because they are going together. So now comes the case study. So it's a case that is similar to no one really, because we are assessing an industry on one side when we are talking about risks, and on the other side it's just one single plant that doesn't really exist, because it's an extrusion plant that mixes synthetic rubber and natural rubber, and I can't really imagine who would do that. Maybe some seals into the construction market could be done like that, but it's mostly a fictional example where we've used real industry data, but in a way where it's really fully anonymized. So let's go to what this is looking like. All of you are rubber professionals, so you know very well how this is all working. You have natural rubber coming on one end, and the rubber producers on the other hand that are making synthetic rubber. It's sold to one part of the industry where the transformers are. It can be a tire manufacturer, it can be a weather seal manufacturer, it can be lots of different a shock absorber of some kind that will sell typically to an OEM mounting a car or making a pipe or doing something like that will send these goods eventually to consumers. Now it's always a bit more complex than that, because you need to consider that you need the mineral fillers and the chemicals also, so that you can make the vulcanization work, and you can have your carbon black coming and clay and all these parts that are going into a typical rubber formulation. But the rubber producers depend on synthetic rubber producers depend on cracking, on the basic chemicals. They depend then on refining, which depends on upstream oil and gas. So that's a pretty big value chain, but that's really what you're doing. You're eventually taking oil that comes from West Texas or somewhere, and it will become a tire and a liner somewhere in the world that will be eventually sold to you and I when we go and change our tires. You need a lot of energy to do that. All of these are very energy intensive processes, so we know that, and we know it's coming. It's not over, because a business, especially when in current exception, you are really thinking about what happens. Some leaks are happening, we know that, and the industry has done a fantastic job over the years reducing these leaks into the environment, especially on the rubber side, even though there's a lot of discussions happening now for plastics. The used goods will be collected typically, and some parts will need to be dismantled. I remember visiting cars dismantling factories in the US in 2018, I believe, and it was quite interesting to see what the parts that we've produced, or the raw material that we provided to tier 2s or tier 1s are becoming once they are once the cars are put apart. And they can be stored, landfilled, very common in the US, or incinerated, and then you can recover the heat. Now there are new ways of doing that also, because you can sort these parts, and some of it can be reused. There is some processes today to do micronized rubber, for instance, from old tires. You can think about mechanical recycling, even though it mostly pertains to thermoplastic elastomer, not so much to vulcanized parts. You can think about chemical or advanced recycling, where you'll try to depolymerize your product and produce new fuels or maybe new cracker feeds. So that's a bit what the rubber industry looks like, and it's pretty complex. Even if you are trying to be super generic and very high level, it's pretty complex. So what we do what you can do is that you take this and you put it in front of the teams. I've done lots of what we call HAZOPs sessions, where you take the map of a plant and you try to see what can go wrong. Basically, what we are trying to do here is that you take this map and you put it in front of the organization with all the subject matter experts around the table and try to see what can go wrong, actually. And we've done just that internally here with partners and consultants in the team, and leveraging some of the subject matter experts that we have around available, and we did that just for rubber industry, just to get a feel. And you will see that very, very quickly you get lots of these risks showing up. So you can see in the next slide that we started, you have this map, and you start to put pins on it. You try to see where are there operational risks, what are the transition risks that we are facing, and or maybe where are the opportunities. And so you really need to get all your SMEs focusing on what they know well and say, you know what, yeah, there is an obvious operational risk with production of natural rubber. As John was mentioning just before, the rain has an impact. If you get more rain, then you will get your natural rubber impacted, and the harvest is complicated to catch up. That's the problem with lots of the biomass, and so that's for instance this number one. I will just take another couple examples. The leaks is a potential transition risk. Actually, it's a question in Europe with that is thinking about applying new restrictions on the microparticles that are emitted during use of the tires. Is that a risk for your business? Is that something that you need to think? Because it's also societally coming at the same time. Some of these activities will be negatively perceived in 5-10 years. That's what a reputational risk is about. Now, there are options also that are good, and you need to think about these ones. Getting more circularity, getting more recycling, getting better recycling is something that you can consider, and it's all these green dots here. And maybe electrification is an opportunity for your business too. I put it in 15 here. I was in a decarbonation workshop last week, where actually people start to think about having electrified boilers, especially here. I live in France, where we get a lot of nuclear power plants. It's a low carbon, quite available electricity that could make boilers actually pretty much electrifiable. So you really have to do and spend the necessary time here, making sure that you get all the inputs from the whole SMEs around. So I hope that you'll see the next slide coming. It's pretty traditional when you do this, when you do a risk session, that you try to rank it in impact and probability, and this is and I will share you can have a look at your ease then on the descriptions here. There are here we just find relatively quickly. I think it was a 2.5 hours session during which we found 14 risks that we eventually kept in our estimates, and we try to score them. So now it's true that everyone has his way of scoring risks. Some people like a 2x2 matrix, or a 9 matrix, or even more. You typically need to make it your own. Some are just measuring the dollar impact of a problem. You know, the shortage of natural rubber, how much can it cost me if it's happening every year? So everyone can do its own little cooking here to get to something that actually can be integrated with the rest of the business risks that there is around. And I just will cover a couple of these examples here. The first one was the number one. It's a high impact and relatively high probability shortage of natural rubber. Extreme climate events impact natural rubber harvest in Southeast Asia. It's identified in rubber associations. You can find in the sustainable rubber documentations that they deal with that. And interestingly, one of the options that they see is that you should use more synthetic rubber. And it's actually mentioned very interestingly in John's slide at the beginning on the discussion on natural rubber markets, that the pressure from one to the other is kind of going. But where we see it as being professional more on the synthetic rubber side, we see also shortage of synthetic rubber a problem. It's a relatively high problem. electrification, especially in Europe and the US, will cause refineries to shut down. And today you only produce chemicals, rubber included, with 15 to 20% of the barrel. It's not a whole lot. We don't know what to do. You basically, it's typically today not technically very easy or affordable to make rubber or plastics with gasoline straight. So what are you going to do if you are shutting down if you depend on a refinery, which is one that will be very affected by electrification, California, for instance, what are you going to do? You might lose your source of synthetic rubber. And we're helping clients who actually are already in this kind of situations. We can think about lots of different things. Some are impacting business strategy, eco-design impacting demand. You know, that's think that the customers want to have a low carbon footprint future in 10 or 15 years, they will ask for materials that are less impactful to the environment, and it will impact the demand. People will use less rubber or less plastic or less tires because they drive less. All of that can have an impact on the strategy. Shortage of energy is also one which is quite interesting. Because that's not one that was on the radar screen of lots of countries, Western developed countries in the recent years, and now it's coming up. Ukraine has made it worse, but Ukraine or not, it's relatively clear that the electric grid in Europe is very susceptible to blackouts. It's relatively clear that electric grid in the US is very, very susceptible to blackout. And operating a refinery, therefore, or a steam cracker, or a rubber production plant, synthetic rubber production plant, you depend on lots of electricity. So how do you manage this? You know, how do you rank this? So all these scores again are pretty high level and a bit finger in the air kind of assessments. But it's relatively easy to get to very, very interesting conversations rather soon when you start to open up the discussion floor with your SMEs. So we've covered risks. I said that GHG are the other side. How do you measure GHG? And it's relatively simple. You need just to map again all your organization and all your activity, from the procurement of raw material to the freight to take it to your plant and what's happening in your plant. Some of the chemical clients that we have are actually emitting CO2 as part of their process. A cement plant, for instance, is producing a lot of CO2. You need to account for all these things, from purchased energy, from direct emission plants. Cooling is very important too, because lots of the cooling gases that are used today in air conditioning have a very high potential for global warming, and they need to be tracked. And you need to follow also the process and the product down to its end of life. When you're making a full circle, and as we said, it's good to involve the whole value chain, to consider the whole value chain, not solve one thing in isolation. We've seen that it doesn't really work because it leads to maladaptation. You think that you are doing great, but actually somebody else is paying the bill for you. And you can calculate all these total emissions. And they are in tons of equivalent CO2 per year. So you get your plant and try to see how much CO2 you are emitted with the total emissions that you have. There are lots of standards that you can use. We are using tools that have been developed in France, because it's mandatory reporting for 15 years now, GHG reporting. But there are lots of there is a good convergence on what is it that you need to put into a GHG emission between the greenhouse gas protocol, the ISO that defines the different categories for which you report, and the carbon disclosure project. So you will really assess how much am I burning internally, including gasoline for business cars, for instance. How much is actually coming from the energy that I'm buying from the outside? It's a scope 2. And then in scope 3, you will take upstream everything that you buy, and scope 3 downstream also everything that your customers are doing with the product that you are producing. We've used a very, very simple plant. It's a 20 KT compounding plus extrusion plant in France. We located it in France because we calculated with the French weight emission factors for electricity. But it can be easily switched, because you can find that in databases what is the electricity mix for anywhere in the world. So, for instance, a kilowatt hour in France is releasing 50 grams of CO2 In Poland, it's about 500 grams, talking about a European country. In China, it's around 900 grams because it really heavily depends on coal still. And so you do all this, everything that I said that you do before. We've done all this for this little plant. We assume that it's a passive part, so there's no energy for usage, which is a simplification of the model. And it's a very limited modeling. For instance, we didn't consider any cooling, and we didn't consider either differentiation that we could have done for wastes. So imagine it's a kind of rubber extruded part that doesn't really exist anywhere, but all of the numbers are real though, in terms of kilowatt hours per kilo for compounding and extrusion, and in the vulcanization tunnels for long extruders, they are pretty real. So it's a mix. We consider the mix of natural rubber and synthetic rubber because we wanted to mostly to display the numbers, because depending on what you are doing, they will be different. And you take all this, it's a formulation that contains oil, 65 pHR, that has a bit of carbon black, some fillers, curatives, 20 pHR of curatives to make it vulcanized. And we consider the upstream scope. You need to build a plant, which, by the way, when you build a plant, you release carbon. So depending on your system, you can allocate it to the ton that year, or you can depreciate it over 20 years. Different models are used, and you are considering really anything that is necessary to produce the article and to give it to your consumer, to the customer, is needs to be evaluated from a carbon perspective. And so when we made all these calculations, you remember it was a 20 KT plant, it's 65 KT of CO2 that it emits. So it's a 3.2 kilo of CO2 per kilo of product, which is pretty common in which is I would say an average number for a plastic or a rubber plant. The total emissions are 65 KT. It's the equivalent of 15,000 cars for the year. So when we are doing industrial sites, we are in the range of between 65 and 200,000 tons. So we're really talking about a big impact to the environment. Scope 1 and 2 are rather small. So the energy that the CO2 that you release directly in your plant or directly from the energy that you purchase is rather small compared to the rest of to the overall consumption. It's about only 20%. We assume average disposition in Europe, a mix of landfill and incineration, and this is 27% of the total emissions. So thinking recycling eventually is a very good way to reduce the overall footprint of your activity. What do you do with the final part? If you just recover energy from it because you burn it somewhere in a good incinerator, that's only halfway there. Reusing a part is a winner. Recycling a part is really good too. Anything else is a lower. Interestingly, for a rubber industry, rubber is not the single largest contributing entrant. So the largest contributing raw material is carbon black. Because when you have a look at how carbon black is made, it's mostly partial combustion with a lot of release of CO2. So carbon black is very energy and CO2 consuming. Location has a big influence on total GHG emission. I talked about that. If your plant runs on French electricity or Canadian electricity, for instance, Canada has a lot of hydropower. Therefore, the CO2 per kilowatt hour is fairly low. It's very different from Germany, where a lot of gas is used, and much lower than China, for instance, where China still puts in the ground about 40 gigajoule of coal plants per year, which is the equivalent of the total nuclear power plants in France. Sourcing policies really have a big influence of GHG. We talked about this, and we work with this on with a client where natural rubber, for instance, the emission factors range from 0.54, which is really the bare minimum. So it means that it's sustainable rubber plants, basically, to 21 if you consider that you will do deforestation to produce natural rubber. So that's where procurement really needs to be extremely digital and extremely detailed in the questions that they ask to their suppliers to understand what are the emissions. All the rest, honestly, is relatively small. Transportation accounts for 5%. Packaging is typically very small, and there are lots of very good practices actually in the rubber industry with returnable metal crates that can make it better. So overall, once you have this, you have your map, and you know where you actually need to go and work to improve your carbon emissions. Once you have done all this, of course, because we're managers and engineers, we want to have a plan. So that's a bit what we've done. We worked a little bit the plan. I won't cover it in lots of details, but we broke it down in between procurement. So what comes from upstream, optimization of your processes, and circularity that I singled out as a pretty good opportunity. And some of this work, interestingly, will improve your climate resilience. So you'll be better equipped to resist to the climate change. Some will also reduce GHG reduction together, and a lot of those will have eventually financial benefits. I think the financial benefits today of reducing GHG is just in the fact that you are moving away from fossil fuels and potentially with a cheaper source of energy if you're smart. Saving wastes will win on all, because wastes impact GHG because the destruction of wastes is causing CO2 emissions. And it will help you a lot financially, because more and more you will have taxes that are actually raised either on CO2 or on waste themselves. So thinking about the climate risks in your supply is important. Consider natural rubber alternatives. I mean, we've seen the guayule, like the Guatex projects from Michel Danger, or the dandelions, that can be an alternative to help you with climate and potentially with GHG reduction too, as it can be closer to the place where it's actually eventually used. Understand the synthetic work streams is very, very important. Where is your monomers coming from? Where is your monomer supply coming from is very, very important to understand whether you are actually safe for the next 20 years. Relocalizing is interesting too, because you will have things in closer contact, which is one thing that actually circularity helps with. Optimize based on the energy balances. We're talking about changing the culture and considering carbon as one of the dimensions to optimization. Improve thermal insulation is a big one, because that contributes to everything. And we know that we've removed a lot of the insulation in lots of plants, and we've created giant radiators. Steam production in industry in Europe is about half of the gas that is consumed. And so better manage it will always go a long way in lots of these different ways, including actually resilience towards disruption in the supply of natural gas that will probably come as a consequence of war. Have a look at electrification, heat integration, be super smart about it. Don't neglect any pocket of, don't let any stone unturned in terms of what you can do there. Biomass opportunities. So can you play? And it was clear in the first in the presentation about the natural rubber market that there are some trade-offs between the natural rubber and the synthetic rubber. Increase TPE and TPV usage. That's probably because it's my older son here. It's my baby. So what we've seen is that it's reducing GHG reduction and improves on climate resilience too, in the sense that you are using molecules that are less affected by climate change. And it has potential financial benefits too if you're smart. Now the wild shot is, of course, it's not working for all kinds of rubber application in the world. 75% of it, or tires, are just inaccessible for it. Increase recycled content, and consider value chain innovations. I call this anything as a service. Typically, when you are controlling this value chain from cradle to grave, or from cradle to circular reuse and recycle, you typically have a better view, a more holistic view to manage upstream and downstream. So that's something that really companies should consider. Moving towards selling a service rather than selling a good is typically a good way to play on all of these factors. So as a conclusion, facing climate disruption, originally I did this deck, a deck somewhat similar nearly a year ago, and the question asked was like, what have we learned about COVID? And Peram mentioned, COVID disruption, climate. We can relearn, reuse a lot of the learnings that we had during these bad years that we recently had. The first one is that the worst can happen, and it will happen more frequently. Climate risks are real. weather events will happen more. They can impact broadly the operations upstream and downstream. They play on our finance products and markets. So unfortunately, climate has already changed and will continue to change. So it's already there, and some events will be really bad. I really encourage people to let data drive decisions. We see lots of things being done in some clients that we have that are a bit peripheral to the problem. They seem to do a lot around what they should actually be working on. So getting to the point where you actually can measure all your risks and can measure your GHG emission is a good way to make sure that the low-hanging fruits that you saw are actually ones that are really changing the nature of the business and making it more resilient. You can think about setting KPIs and targets. There are lots of instances that actually help you with that. Science-based targets, SBTI, for instance, is one where you submit a dossier basically, and they're kind of sanctioning it and saying, hey, you are consistent with the Paris Agreement at -1.5 or -2. One thing that was very obvious for everyone who's been in the business for some years, interdependency of value chain actors is really super high. And you need to understand where your stuff comes from. And we talked about, like, I remember working BCPs, for instance, for purchasing. And typically what you do to lower your risk of purchasing is that you find a second supplier. Here, I would argue, you probably need to think to find a second supplier, which is not located in the same area or doesn't have the same climate risk as the other one. Because that would be a way where you increase your resilience, regardless of what's happening to the first one from a climate perspective. You really have to think value chain. Transition offers also lots of circularity opportunities, as we talked about. People want to do more circularity. There's a very good drive today to lower the waste that eventually goes in either landfill or upgrade through incineration. Go through that. It's much broader than just working on your plants. I think that crisis accelerate innovation. The rubber industry is super active in innovation. There are lots of patents, there are lots of different ways, and lots of things have been explored. Some were sometimes too early. Some now are coming to the point where actually from a climate perspective it might be desirable. So really go back to this innovation board and think about how can you do different. And sometimes, very interestingly, I really encourage people to see all the ones that are in TRL levels that are fairly high, but were not run because they were a bit too expensive, or there was no appeal, marketable appeal at the time, to go back and have a look at that. Replacing lots of stuff by biomass today has a big appeal and a big marketing drive, so you might want to reconsider all these sort of things. And it can be in products, it can be in processes, or it can be in business models, as I say, with selling stuff as service, anything as a service. And my last point here is you need to embrace change. So it's like, I don't think we can be in denial anymore of anything, because even if for the ones that are mostly skeptical of climate change, we see the effect. And I think just be in a material or engineering hat here, not so much in the belief in something. It is happening. Have a look, measure it, and consider ways to reduce it. It can really support the transformation of the organization. And I think that the bottom line at the end is that do nothing is not an option. Failure is not an option, and do nothing in the case of climate change is probably leading to failure or disappearance of the activity. So it's a very high stake game, and we have to start to act now. So that was the end of my presentation, Perm.
Wow, Maxim, you gave the people a real warning that, guys, change. It's time, high time. It is really high time.
I hope I gave a little bit of, hope and methodology too, which is
yeah. With I think climate change is inevitable. We had to change. and there are solutions to do better compared to what you're doing now. I think you put that figure 2050, you see the climate change disruption. Wow, I think whoever is going to live in the next 30 years, they may see the real issues at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah? And it's a real info for the not just for the rubber industry, every industry, okay? Humankind totally. It's not just industry itself, and it's a very nice message, useful message that for the rubber industry to look into it. Whether you are a small company or a big company, does not matter. Everybody has to act.
Yes.
Find a ways. That is I think that what I understand, what I really value on this presentation. I have a couple of issues that I chat with you on this. It's like an energy audit. It's like a waste audit. Okay, it's like quality audit. You combine all together. We're looking at it's like you're covering everything into the GHG.
Yeah.
Because whatever the waste you created, you're reflecting into the GHG.
Yes.
Whatever your energy side. Okay, so is it feasible to do this? Small companies also conduct these studies.
So we are doing it with small companies. I'm actually doing it as we speak. We are developing a project to get people on a kind of carbon bus because it's I can't. It's not in the rubber industry. It's more in the metalworking industry. They are between the rock and the hard place in lots of ways because they buy stainless steel from very, very big companies and they sell to automotive OEMs, and they are stuck in between, and they see their increase in prices of raw materials, increase in energy. They are also asked to reduce their GHG because their OEMs asked for that, and they always ask for also for cheaper products, and they see the transition coming, because electrification makes lots of these parts totally useless. So they need to think about all these things. But they are small companies, so getting into a like 20, 30 days consultant kind of project is not within their range. So they group together. So if there's one thing that you can think about, is like if there are federations, that group a couple of companies, because generally, especially when people share same kinds of businesses and same kind of processes, a lot of the methods can be used, and we can use a lot of collective intelligence. I really encourage people to talk a lot in networks and join the networks of decarbonation on one hand for GHG or climate risks. I think the cost of inaction is too high, so everyone has to think about how do you budget this. And it can be small, it can be a start, but I think the more you think about it and the more you see it. And what we see is that also, even with small companies have an advantage, which is that they go fast, and they can be the ones who actually innovate. So paying or learning some of these methods, or getting someone to come and work by your side to structure your thought process and what you're going to do to plan to resolve some of the issues that you have is quite affordable. It's not only for multinationals. In France, all companies above with more than 500 people have to report their GHG. So it's just to give you an idea. So that's already quite a lot of businesses. When you talk about multiple sites, companies that are making rubber parts, it will be in this ballpark number. So it's quite affordable actually. And yeah. And it's always like, I said this, it's a paraphrase from a Caterpillar commercial from the 90s, where they say, if you think that safety is expensive, try an accident. And I would say the same thing here. If you think that adaptation is expensive because you will need to make the assessment and also invest in some solutions, letting it go is probably not affordable.
And you see, when it comes to the awareness about the climate change, I think Europe probably the leading, right, in terms of the understanding, the valuing it, change, are there any incentives for the companies to do this kind of assessments from the government. Let's talk about French. You're based in France,
Yeah.
so yeah.
It's a very good question. So Europe has really put lots of subsidies. They've drafted this plan. If you look at the Paris Agreement, we are supposed to reduce our emissions by 40% before the end of the decade. We haven't started yet, just as a heads up. We haven't started yet because we still continue to grow emissions. So, and Europe has launched this Fit for 55 plan where they say that they want to reach 55% lower by the end of the decade. And they go and support, they are financing some projects too. What is very interesting too is like what I really like is when Europe or governments in general are basically getting these things started, because what I've seen is that also lots of these things are very efficient and very affordable. Electrification wins in lots of areas, not only for cars, but we are seeing more and more electrifying. I was surprised to see that you can get today boilers of 10 megawatts that are actually fully electric. If you live in a country that has a good grid with a relatively low carbon of electricity, that's a very good investment right now. And so the technologies come and you can get the subsidies to do some of that. So there's clearly in Europe a drive to do that. It's similar in the US. It's much more in Asia Pacific. We are conducting studies and market studies on this. It's still very, very country specific and country dependent. And in lots of occasions, it's only at the beginning of the I would say the industrial development curve in some areas. So it might not be there, but there's also there an opportunity to do right first time. I always give the same example of water adduction. We used to have lead pipes, and then we had iron cast pipes, and now we have PhD pipes for bringing tap water. If you want to give anyone in the world today access to tap water, you want to give them PhD, polyethylene pipes. And I think for some of this approach to energy, that's really what you want to do. You want to build right, and actually developing economies and investing fast-growing economies have always been in the forefront of getting the latest and greatest in terms of innovation, which probably means in that case today lower emission solutions. You don't want to go through the learnings of the mistakes that the Europe and the US have done in the last 200 years to build your homes and reinforce the grids in Asia Pacific for sure.
When look at all the benefits they gain out of this assessment. Okay, you may look at the CO2 emission reduction, okay, the final destination or final target. In the meantime, actually, you really save a lot of money.
Yes.
So, I think that is the marketing tool. Why you need to do, because when you talk about the GHG or the Paris Agreement, it's all about a policy maker or union body.
Agree.
But normal people like us, we don't understand at all. Okay, we have a plan. How much reduction is there? Production is that. Okay. Somebody is polluting more, somebody is polluting less, and all these things are on the bigger scale. But when down to the industry person, it's what matters to them is survival, day-to-day survival.
Absolutely.
And you're talking about energy savings, okay, or waste, reducing the waste. It converts you into the, it's profits. At the end of the day, is it right?
It's continuous improvement. What we build for businesses once we've been through, understanding what was already existing or what we bring. But in general, it's really like, they all have the ideas. It's just like they don't know how to structure it in a certain way. And we are building what we call the marginal abatement curve. And you put the cost and the ton of CO2 abated. The y-axis is really the money that you spent, and on the x-axis you consider the amount of CO2 that you abate. And as good in people in the industry, you typically do your low-hanging fruit, the low costs, high impact projects first, and then you will think later about doing all these sort of things. And nearly all the abatement curves that I've seen start with actually credits. You know, does investment, but there is credit to do it, because as you say, you will reduce your amount of waste, which means that you will pay less waste tax in a sense, or you will reduce your energy consumption and therefore reduce your energy bills. So it's clear that what is at the left hand side of the curve typically helps the business in the base case. And what you do is that when you start to change the culture and incorporate CO2 as something that you also measure your business against, just imagine a CO2. Europe, for instance, as an emission trading scheme. If you just have a look at the profitability of certain energy savings projects, kind of borderline. If you incorporate well, have a look, make scenarios. You know, I've been so long all my career thinking that I knew exactly what CO2 cost will be in the future that I gave up. Right, we can't predict all these prices for a very long time, so we are very inclined to say to people, let's have a look at two scenarios. You know, a scenario where nothing is really happening, and in the end it's okay, and then it's 30 euros per ton of CO2. Or imagine that actually it's becoming very expensive to abate CO2, and therefore the emission trading scheme moves to like 200 euros per ton. And have a look at, are your projects affordable? Do they bring value? And what you realize is that, as you said, for lots of these projects, they are efficiency projects. Just you have a look, and you know, you are bringing another efficiency that they might not have seen. And it's true also for Asia. Europe starts to put together taxes at the border where they say that they want to basically have an import duty linked to the cost of carbon of producing elsewhere. And because they say, well, if you buy an EV vehicle that's actually made in a country that is using a lot of coal, it makes much less sense than actually build it in nearby where we have nuclear electricity or wind electricity or solar electricity that has a much lower CO2, and you will kind of defeat the purpose. And so they want to apply these sort of taxes. So you need to calculate. And all of a sudden, when you start to calculate this, you say, well, actually, you know, something is changing. We are participating with one of our clients to a process which is called Together for Sustainability, where companies will have to report their product carbon footprint downstream, especially in chemicals where you make, you know, formulations that comprise 10 different products and they come from other. So they start to align on standards, and it's rather clear. I've seen it's basically purchasing chief purchasing officer making the presentation actually to their suppliers and telling them we are committed to reduce our GHG emissions, and by the way, this will be an element to, you know, at say if it is the same price and similar quality, we'll probably choose the one that is actually the most efficient from a carbon perspective because it helps us achieve our objectives. And so this it's definitely coming. So as I say, the transition risks are always like an opportunity and a risk at the same time.
You know, one thing is a bit concerned is resource depletion. You have mentioned, I think, the serious issue. I think it's synthetic rubber. Should we worry about it in the future? The availability? What's fine?
If you want a short answer, I would say it's a good idea to worry. At least you will make the assessment. It really depends on the molecules and where it's coming from, but it's relatively clear. When I have a look at the refining industry in Europe, refineries will shut down. We'll electrify the park. We'll electrify mobility. Once you electrify mobility, the need for gasoline disappears. With no gasoline or diesel needs, you don't need a refinery. You don't build refineries to make naphtha. If you don't have naphtha, you won't have the aromatic molecules. You won't have the steam crackers behind it. So a lot of these molecules will be very challenged. And it really depends, because sometimes you will talk with suppliers who actually have this under control because they are really like naphtha producers and they are securing as much as they can locally. But if gasoline becomes long in Europe and refineries start to shut down, yes, that's a problem for synthetic rubber availability. You need lots of these molecules to make synthetic rubber. When they will start to be in competition with other things, that's complex. We also try to influence long-term projects. There are lots. You can't really make chemicals, regardless of what you think about the transition. You can't really make chemicals straight from crude. You know, the crude cracking does not really exist yet. You still, when you crack crude, you still make lots of gasoline and lots of diesel. If you don't have a need for these molecules, that's going to be a problem. So some technologies are being worked, and actually China is at the forefront of that, where they make a lot of these crude to olefins processes, because they know that once you've electrified everything, you will need to make your plastics, your synthetic rubber, and the rest of your chemicals, your solvents, your carbon black from some other stuff. And they're working on some other stuff too. But yeah, that's a challenge, and it really depends on where you are located. Probably less of a worry in Asia, I would say, because ICE will still be the first car for lots of people for many years. But many years is typically what, you know, I still talk like an old oil man, right? We're talking about many years. Here we talk about things that need to happen in 20, 30 years. The risk of stranded assets and stuff is fairly high, and actually the financial community is having a big look at that. And so, yeah, if you depend on someone and just one plant, which is actually backed up by a refinery which is rather small, not very efficient, produces lots of gasoline with a low naphtha production, you might be in trouble. Might want to have a look at it.
So the research plays an important role to sustain, I think, particularly sustainable materials.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, I think that all the tire companies are very active in, you know,
Yes.
planning about sustainable materials. I think now we understand that why they are so serious about it, and I think they've invested in developing alternate sources, recycling. Recycling plays a big role.
Yes.
So
there's recycling, differentiated sources. I've come across recently about an offer for someone who's offering phenolic resin coming from pine trees. Now, the little problem also, talking as an old oil man, is like it's probably one solution, but it's not the solution. That's a bit of the problem also with this transition. I think that we've all used to think in very linear ways and standard ways, and assume that everywhere in the world people will just use the same oil to make the same tires, and they will all look the same everywhere. Once you start to go and diverge, it's maybe not so right everywhere now. That everything will be just the same. So there will be more diversity. So it's an opportunity for small innovations, for small companies also to create a kind of niche market that can be geographically very, very attractive, and maybe not so much globally. I see this here. I live in an area which has lots of excedent of wood. People are still using firewood to heat the homes, and it's probably all right, but it's not something that you can use in Shanghai. So that's where, you know, the energy transition also is really closely linked to this movement of relocalization of know-how, techniques, technologies, and potentially markets.
And how about, you know, if somebody want to do this assessment, you call it a climate risk assessment or GHG emissions risk? Is it a climate risk assessment?
Well, we call it climate. We have a program that's called climate resilience, where you do the two things together, because you typically have the same people, so you don't, you know, you are maximizing the need, and
Right.
when you ask them, you know, show me the plot plan of the plant, because I need to understand, you know, how these boxes are made, and tell me the ones that are actually impacted if it's much warmer. You typically all do all these things together. You would typically conduct the climate risk assessment together with the GHG assessment, because what we are trying to avoid, or we're trying to maximize the fact, you know, an action plan in the end that actually kills two birds with one stone, and also avoids maladaptation, as we've seen. You know, a typical case of maladaptation is that you put more air conditioning, and you're like, yeah, that's great. It will be better to adapt to climate, but it will have an impact in the long term. And by the way, you will consume more energy or have more release of PFCs and that's not good for anyone. So that's but it really depends clients to clients. And what I've seen is that some come because they have a need for GHG, because their customers ask for it, or they think it's a good way. And I think engineers like the fact that it's an easy KPI which you can compare with others and everything. So, and it's very easy then to make all these plans. I mean, we've all seen, we are all used to do these sort of things when it comes down to finance. It's the same thing. And then when they hear more about climate, they also want to do they can do the climate risks. And we have some other clients who just want climate risk assessments, which you can do on a standalone basis, disregarding the GHG assessment. But yeah, that's there's a lot of different ways to go to that. ESG is very important today, or green, or whatever you call it, is very important, but there are really millions of ways to go after the things. And what we try to help people with is to make sure that they do the most important things first, because we only have a limited time and all limited resources, financial or human, to do that.
And do you have like a tool, like a software tool to self-assess that, okay, I have mixing operations, what is my GHG, or you develop Romi has some solutions like this?
We're actually trained, so we're using the French tool, which has been developed 20 years ago, and is one of the tools that is positively listed by CDP and GHG protocol as being compliant. So that's what we are doing. And as we mentioned that we are a mission venture, our purpose is to make sure that organizations are autonomous. So what we do is that we build the tools. The tool is it's a massive Excel database that has lots of these emission factors databases, and we parameter it to adapt it to the organization. We leave it to the organization afterwards. So people can, 3 years later, they come back to it and they say, hey, what have we done? Our goal is that they are autonomous to manage these emission reductions in the long term. And it's very important. What is very important is that we have the license of the tool because we are trained experts or certified experts to use this tool, and we have adapted it because we are doing also lots of we have chemical add-ons basically to be able to calculate this product carbon footprint for the chemical industry, which is slightly different, and it's much more industrial. So we have streamlined all these things, and we have a bit more reporting tools that are tied back to it. But the calculation engine, we actually have to live it. It's one of these things which is very surprising when you are in consulting businesses or in licensed businesses where you give the tool away, and the license says that we have to give the tool away to the customers that we are visiting. So that's what we do. And we've developed all the methodologies then on climate, which is really bringing together. We have collectively hundreds of years of experience in the chemical industry, and it's all thinking risk. So yeah, we have methodologies, list of questionnaires, so that you can basically test the organization, put this map of the organization somewhere on the wall, and ask yourself what can go wrong. And everybody's surprised by how many things can go wrong actually when it comes down to climate.
Well, it's a lot of eye-opening messages, Maxim, really useful. I'm hoping that the industry understands it well and act as quickly as possible, not for themselves, for the future generation, for their own children or their children, So
yes.
It's not for us anymore. I think it's the next generation, and so
it's clear that our kids will probably be our age when they see a world which looks not as pleasant to live in as we know, either because there are some things that they can't do anymore because it's not affordable, because fossil fuels have disappeared, or because it's just lots of climate events that will reduce their access to food, access to energy, access to travels, and that's going to be a problem. Want to avoid that, but we have. The good news is that there are lots of things that exist that are possible. We don't need a lot of. I'm a big fan of technology, but when I see TRL2 to save the world for something that happens before the end of the decade, no, I've been in industry too much not to know that it's not credible. But the good news is that between energy savings and electrification, there are lots of things in the tool set, and we have lots of experts around that can help organizations with steam management and electricity management and all these sort of things. But it really depends on anyone's priorities, of course.
Yeah, I think the solutions are there. It's kind of low-hanging fruits. You just need to pick it up and know which one you want to implement. The most important is you mentioned rightly, embracing the change is the key.
Yeah,
that is that is a message for the any industry, not just the rubber industry. Prepare themselves. So,
yeah.
Maxim, fantastic. Thank you very much. And any final message to the audience?
Keep hope, and I know that a lot of these messages are a bit depressing typically. I have my range of eco-anxiety. Sometimes I freak out because I realize, some things. I live in the Alps, and it's rather clear that by 2100, so 78 years from now, there won't be any ice fields left in the Alps in the higher scenario. And so sometimes it's making me sad, or it's freaking me out, makes me sad for my kids that they won't be able to enjoy the things that we've enjoyed as kids. And I think it's our duty now to do something. And that's probably the last message. We can do stuff. It's just like we need to make sure that we prioritize it rightly. So.
Yeah, Maxim, thank you very much. I think we had to hope, we still have hope to set things right. It's not even the things may be not in control, but there are solutions that are available to do better and act responsibly for the sake of future generation. Okay?
Absolutely.
It's not just an industry, it's a humankind. So yeah. Good message, man. Thanks a lot once again. Okay, we catch up again in some other issue some other time. Appreciate the time. I
hope so. Hey, take care.
Thanks a lot. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Guys, that's the end of the presentation discussion, the business talk on the rubber industry in the age of climate disruption. Okay, I think Maxim has given us a lot of useful message which we need to act. I'm hoping that we follow some of the suggestions and guidance, and everybody should do this climate resilience or climate risk assessment in your own plant and find a solution. I'm sure that it definitely gives you the excellent financial benefits as well. Not only your help, reducing the GHG, but also the saving money by not wasting your resources. That's very good presentation. So if you're interested to watch this session again, you can always go to our TechnoBiz channel on YouTube, okay, or you want to watch on all the past episodes, so please do check our TechnoBiz channel on YouTube. You know how to contact me. I think most of you have my contact information. If you have any comments, suggestions, or welcome, and happy to make changes as appropriate in the future episodes. I hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you all for joining. Bye-bye for now.